crammed together. A man with a flashlight waited until they all gathered in a huddle. He wore all black, including his cap, the brim pulled down so far that all that was apparent was his black mustache and a small, narrow chin. They picked their way through the alley again, following the direction of the man's light. At the street, a paneled van waited, the motor running. The door slid open, and Marco could see that the seats had been removed to create a cavern. It was already filled with people, all standing up. Men and women held small suitcases and had plastic garbage bags next to them filled with their belongings. There didn't seem to be an inch of additional space until the flashlight man yelled, "Mueva! Move!" The people in the van crammed closer together as each of the group of 8 climbed inside. "Mas!" said the flashlight man. The people tried to squash together. Papa jumped inside and grabbed Marco's hand, pulling him in too, but Marco was still half out. The man shoved Marco as if he were packing an already stuffed suitcase. The others groaned and complained. The doors slid shut behind Marco. When the van surged forward, no one fell because there was no room to fall. Their bodies nested together, faces pressed against faces like tightly bundled stalks of celery. Marco turned his head to avoid his neighbor's breath and found his nose pressed against another's ear. The van headed east for a half hour. Then it stopped suddenly. The door slid open, and Flashlight Man directed them into the night. His cell phone rang to the tune of "Take me out to the ball game," and he quickly answered it. "1 hour. We will be there," he said into the phone. Then he turned to the small army of people and said, "Let your eyes adjust to the night, then follow me." Marco and Papa held back. They were the last in the group, forming the line of obedient lambs walking over a hill and down into an arroyo. There was no water at the bottom, just rocks, dirt, and dry grasses. Visions of reptiles crowded Marco's mind. He was relieved when they climbed back up and continued to walk over the mostly barren ground. They crossed through a chain-link fence where an opening had been cut. "Are we in the United States?" asked Marco. "Yes," said Papa. "Keep walking." They walked along a dirt road for another half hour, and in the distance, headlights blinked. Flashlight Man punched a number into his cell phone. The headlights came on again. "That's it," said Flashlight Man, and they all hurried toward the van, where they were again sandwiched together inside. That wasn't so bad, thought Marco, as the van sped down a dirt road. A tiny bud of relief began to flower in his mind. No worries. Within 5 minutes, the van slowed to a crawl and then stopped. Marco heard someone outside barking orders at the driver. Suddenly, the van door slid open and Marco met La Migra. 4 border patrol officers with guns drawn ordered them out and herded them into 2 waiting rooms with long bench seats. A small consolation, thought Marco. They rode back to the border patrol station in silence. Inside, it was exactly as Papa had said. They stood in line, gave false names during a short interview, were fingerprinted, and released. "Now what?" asked Marco as they stood in front of the border patrol building on the Mexico side. "We walk back to La Casa del Coyote," said Papa. It was 7 in the morning as they walked down the narrow streets. Most shops weren't open yet, and bars and fences enclosed the vendor stalls, which were filled with piñatas, leather goods, ceramics, and sombreros. Papa bought pre-made burritos and cokes inside a corner tienda before they turned down the street that led to Coyote Lady's house. Many of their group had already found their way back to the basement room off the alley. Papa and Marco found a spot against the wall and fell asleep. They woke late in the afternoon, went to the taco vendor on the corner for food, and came back and watched the video, The Little Mermaid. Marco listened to the Fish Maiden's song. She wanted to be free to go to another world. Like me, he thought. It seemed everyone wanted to get to the other side. In the middle of the night, they were roused and put in a van for another attempt to cross over. Again, the Border Patrol sat in wait and ambushed them, as if they had known they were coming. Each night, the van took them a little farther east into the desert, but after 5 attempts, they were no farther into the United States than they'd been the first night. Early Sunday morning, Coyote Lady came down the stairs into the basement room. She wore a dress like the ones Marco's mother wore for church, a floral print with a white collar, although it was much bigger than any dress his mother owned. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, and she looked like someone's aunt or a neighborhood woman who might go to mass every day. Today is a big football game, professional, in San Diego. La Migra will be eager to get people into the U.S. in time for the game. We start moving you in 1 hour, one at a time. The wait will not be bad at the border this morning. But later today, closer to game time, it will be horrible. Marco looked at Papa. He did not want to be separated from him. Papa said, "How?" "In a car," said you, Coyote Lady. "We hide you. If I take only one across at a time, the car doesn't ride low in the back and does not look suspicious. I drive in a different lane each time. As you can see, we are having trouble with the usual ways, so we try this. It has worked before, especially on a busy day." Marco didn't like the idea of being away from Papa. What would happen if Papa got across and he didn't? Or what if he couldn't find Papa on the other side? Then what would he do? He didn't like this part of the journey. Suddenly he wished he had stayed home for another year in Xocotepec. As if reading his mind, Papa said, "I will go before you, Marco, and I will wait for you. I will not leave until you arrive. And if you don't arrive, I will come back to Tijuana." Marco nodded. Coyote Lady gave orders and told a woman to get ready to go. Every hour, she stuck her head inside the room and called out another person. Papa and Marco were the last of the group to go. They walked outside. In the alley, the trash cans had been pushed aside to make room for an old car, a sedan. Flashlight Man waited beside the car, but he wasn't wearing his usual black uniform. Instead, he had on jeans, a blue and white football jersey, and a Chargers cap. He lifted the hood. Inside, a small rectangular coffee table had been placed next to the motor, forming a narrow ledge. 2 of the wooden legs disappeared into the bowels of the car, and 2 of the legs had been cut short and now provided the braces against the radiator and motor. "Okay," he said, "you lie down in here. It only takes a half hour. There's a van waiting for you in Chula Vista that will take you to your destinations."